that tells us how science has come to believe we got here. We're going to look at which one makes most sense and which one is the most scientific. And then finally, at the end, we're going to have a discussion on what's really going on. Why do we even have two scenarios, and why are they so important? Because they are very important. And we'll deal with that in the third phase of this. It may take 2 or 3, maybe 4 Sundays, but feel free to ask any questions, to offer any input that you might have, and to stump the teacher. Just go ahead and try to stump the teacher. All right. We're going to look at God's first, since for us God's most important. And we find the entire scenario in Genesis chapter 1. So somebody read verse 1, please.
In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Is it just verse 1?
First verse.
Oh, I did.
Verse 2.
Oh,
Sorry.
Second verse. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Okay. All right. If you wanted to create this, what would be the first thing you'd need?
The church? What are we creating?
No, you'd have to have people live in church.
The earth, the world.
Oh,
The
universe.
Creation.
First thing you
If
need.
you were gonna go out and if you were going to create something, what would be the first thing you'd need? If you were going to build a house, what would be the first thing you'd need?
Foundation, raw materials.
Huh?
Raw materials.
A plan?
Frame.
A plan? Blueprint?
Plan, a frame.
You need land.
Keep going backwards. Keep going backwards.
Foundation.
Huh?
Foundation.
Keep going backwards.
The creator.
Bill, is it land?
Huh?
Land?
You'd need a piece of land. Then the foundation. Then you'd need a plan. Okay? And you go from there. And that's how things get created. Houses, buildings, schools, whatever. First you need a piece of land. Then you need to pour a foundation, come up with a plan, and you build it. Well, God did the exact same thing in chapter 1 here. It said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And what does that encompass? For the sake of efficiency, it is the container that we call the universe. He first created a place for it to be. Okay? And just like anything that we create, and what we just talked about, you first need a place to put it. A house needs a piece of ground, it needs foundation, it needs floor plan. Hey, Bonnie. So, makes sense. Somebody read 3 through 5.
Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day.
Okay. Now, if you want to have life, what's the first thing you got to have? What's the most important thing for life to exist?
Light.
Light.
Light. How do we know that's true?
Because if you put a plant in the dark, it'll die.
Huh?
If you put a plant in the dark, it'll die.
Okay. Evidence. We have evidence. We have experience that says that's true. Okay. Give me another example.
We'll die without light. Our bodies will die without light.
Our bodies would die without light. I mean, vitamin D in our body is created by sunshine striking our skin. Okay, so we know that's true. Okay, give me another example. Look at the moon. Okay. What's the temperature of the moon? Now, it's going to be a little different on Earth because we have an atmosphere to reflect and to retain some of the heat. But it's still the same scenario. On the bright side of the moon, when the sun's shining on the moon, what's the temperature on the moon?
Never
260 degrees Fahrenheit. On the dark side of the moon, at the exact same time, when the side of the moon that's in the shade, what's the temperature of the moon?
Negative 200. Probably negative 260 degrees.
170, but you're in the ballpark, right? So we got like a 200-degree variance there between the one and the other, okay? Now, if all was darkness and we didn't have light, and there wasn't a cycle where it spun around and there was a heating and cooling process going on, what would the temperature of the moon be, or the Earth, if it was completely dark?
Well, absolute zero.
Absolutely.
Absolute zero, which is 492 degrees below zero. So could anything live? No. How long would it take the Earth to cool down if the sun went out?
Overnight?
Probably
Overnight?
less than a
Overnight?
second.
Well, that'd be the moon, because there's no atmosphere to hold the Earth. We're talking, but you're real close. It's like 2 to 3 days, nothing would be alive. Everything would be dead. So the most important thing we've got in order to sustain life is what?
Light.
Light. What did God do first?
Created light.
Created light. Okay, this is starting to make sense? All right. Let's read 6 to 8.
And God said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was, so God called the vault sky, and there was an evening and there was a morning, the second day.
Okay. What is this? What is the second most important thing we need in order to sustain life?
Water.
Water. How long can you live without water?
3
About 3 hours. Me.
3
days. 3 days.
3 to 4 days.
Who said what?
You said 3 days.
3 days? Yep. In normal circumstances, if you're out in nature, 3 days. By the time, if you're in a desert and you don't have any water for 3 days, you may live for 3 days, but you're not going to be conscious. You're going to be hallucinating. You're going to have all kinds of problems. Do you ever get anybody in the hospital that's dehydrated?
Oh, yeah.
And what are the symptoms?
Well, their skin's dry. Usually their blood pressure's low, they're confused, they can't walk, they can't function.
Their body's shutting down.
Yes.
Okay. Without water, now there are instances where people, like in Ukraine, they've done people out of the building after the 5th or 6th day, and they were alive. They weren't in very good shape, but they were alive. But they were in a situation where the sun wasn't shining on them. They weren't exposed to the elements. They had some little bit of protections, shelter, and that lengthened a little bit. But on average, you don't have water for 3 days, you're probably going to be unconscious and most likely dead. So Ethan had it right on the number. All right. So water is number 2. All right. Now notice it made a comment here about the sky. It separated the sky from the land. What did that mean?
Atmosphere.
The atmosphere. He created an atmosphere to hold what?
Oxygen, gravity.
Oxygen, and also to protect us. Back in the beginning, how long did people live?
Hundreds of years. Hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years. Methuselah was 960, 969 years. Okay. Methuselah lived 969. Okay.
Give or take a day or two.
Why did mankind all of a sudden stop living 900 years and start living 100 years?
Because of Noah, the flood.
And what happened at the flood that made, scientifically, what happened at the flood that created the difference?
The sky.
Scott? Before creation, or before the flood, the earth was watered by a mist that settled at night, watered all the vegetation, and then when the sun came up in the morning, it rose up and created a liquid canopy around the earth. All right? What did that do for mankind, for animals, for plants, for everything else? It filtered out the ultraviolet rays. And people lived a lot longer because the ultraviolet rays weren't destroying their body. You see, as you get older, your body begins to wrinkle, you start to get spots. A friend of mine just had a big cancer taken off of his hand. And it's all caused, a lot of it is caused by ultraviolet rays. Right? Now, do we have any evidence on Earth today, scientifically, that that's probably true? Can we tell you? Okay. How long does a tortoise live if he lives in the woods? You know, those little box turtles you see on the road. How long?
20 years?
Double it. 40? Okay. How long does he live if he lives in an area like where there isn't a woods or isn't a lot of shade and he gets a lot of sunshine? How long would he live?
20.
20 years. Okay. It's actually like 12 to 20, but they live a lot shorter life because of it. Now, a sea turtle, how long does he live? In the ocean. He's in the ocean. He's got water all around him. The water is filtering out the sun. How long do they live?
100 years.
400 and some years is the average. Okay, so we got evidence. We got scientific evidence that canopy that used to be before the flood made a big difference in how we live, because after the flood, it rained, the canopy wasn't there anymore. We had direct exposure to the sun, and we started dying a whole lot earlier than 900 years. Is it making sense? Right.
Is that why old people go to Florida?
Have you ever seen the people that look in Florida? They look like a dried up old glove. But they are happy. If you're happy, you're happy.
All that vitamin D. All that vitamin D.
All right, where are we at here?
9?
9.
9 through 13.
And God said, let the water under the sky be gathered in one place, and let dry ground appear. And it was so. God called the ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their variant kind. And it was so. And the land produced vegetables, plants bearing seeds according to their kind, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kind. As God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the third day.
Okay, what's the third thing we need is there's going to be life upon the earth.
Food.
Huh?
Food.
Food. And what did God create next?
Taco Bell.
Create food.
That'd kill you.
Say what?
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. He said,
It's Taco Bell.
Taco Bell.
Nourishment.
You stay over on that side of the room. So when the lightning strikes, I can keep going. All right, but there has to be food. How long can you go without food?
3 weeks.
Oh,
3 weeks.
yeah, maybe you.
100 a day.
Rest of us could probably go 6 months. As long as we've got a lot of water, most of us could live weeks and weeks without food. Even starvation, kids that are dying of starvation in Africa sometimes hang on for months and months. I mean, they're weak, they're pitiful, they're miserable, but food is the third most important thing. So are you starting to see an intelligent thought here? First, there had to be light. All the food in the world wouldn't have sustained us if we didn't have light. And you could have enough food for 5 years, but if you didn't have enough water for 3 days, it wouldn't do you a bit of good. So God, in his own process, followed his own rules and scientifically created the earth, because he also created science, didn't he? All right. All right. Now let's go to 14 through, my wife moved my Bible out of my truck, so I'm trying to read this tiny print. 14 through 19.
And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth. And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the 4th day.
Okay. Who would this benefit? What would this benefit?
Sleep schedule. A sleep schedule. You got morning and night, and you'll be able to sleep.
Okay. And who does that benefit? Living creatures, right? And also, what if it were totally, completely pitch black at night?
Run into
Would we
things.
be able to function? I mean, how would we, now, we're talking about creation here, we're not talking about 2020 or 2022. We're talking about day 4, okay? If human beings and animals and whatever, if they were created at this point, what would they do at night?
Sleep.
Well, they wouldn't be able to function. Yeah, sleep would be about it, because they wouldn't be able to function in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we would be totally helpless half of the day. Okay, so he puts the lights in the sky, the major lights and the minor lights, the moon and the sun. He puts all those, see, he said let there be light, but he didn't say let there be a sun. The sun wasn't developed until day 4. The light that he was talking about in the beginning was his glory that sustained it for the first 3 days. Then on the 4th day, he made it so that it could be self-sustaining without his presence, and that we would be able to function both day and night, better in the day than at night, but the night was meant for rest anyway. But sometimes you have to move around at night. Sometimes you have to do things. Sometimes you have to go out and find out what that noise was in the backyard.
Go to the bathroom.
That's right. Sometimes you have to find a bathroom. And remember, back then they didn't have houses and lights and light switches and electricity, so they were going to have to function to some extent during the night. Okay, So before he created the living creatures, what did he create? He created an environment where they could survive and get things done that needed to be done. Right. Let's go 20 through 23.
Then God said, let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded according to their kind, and every winged bird according to his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day.
Okay. What would have happened if there were billions of years between plants and animals?
Plants would overtake.
Okay. Well, that was true in the beginning anyway. The entire earth in the beginning was covered by a tropical forest, rainforest type vegetation. The earth was totally and completely covered with vegetation. Every square inch of it. How do we know that? Want me to tell you?
Besides it's saying here, we have fossils that from if you go into areas that like desert areas and other places, you'll find fossils of plants there.
Okay. We have fossils and plants to show that I have a spring that comes out of a hole in a rock, and it's a big hole. You can walk up in there and stand up in there and look around. There's fossils all over the walls of that spring. Plants, animals, seashells. I picked them up. I put some lights on them. Come out sometime. We'll go up there and take a look. There's fossils in there of everything, of living animals, of plants, and they're all there together. Right? So there's fossils. There's one other thing that covers the entire surface of the earth that can only be created by compressed vegetation. What is it?
Or coal. Coal.
Coal. They found coal in Antarctica. They found coal in the Arctic Circle. Everywhere they drill, when they get to a certain point, they find a layer of coal. Sometimes it's a big layer of coal, like in Africa, and sometimes it's a smaller layer of coal, like Antarctica or in the far north. But there's coal everywhere. And the only way it can get there is for vegetation to grow, to die, to fall down. More falls on top of it, it becomes compressed, and sooner or later it becomes coal. Now if you keep compressing it, what does it become? Diamonds. And we have diamonds to prove that the process has been working. How much compression does it take to create a diamond? Over a long period of time, it takes less because it has an accumulating effect. You can go into a lab and you can create a diamond in a day with the stuff that we have today. You can create a diamond out of a chunk of coal in an hour or two, simply by putting immense pressure on it. So it proves itself. It says that at one point the entire earth was covered with vegetation. Now, what's the problem with having billions of years between the plants and the animals? We have a symbiotic relationship. Means that we benefit each other, but at the same time we need each other. Why?
Carbon dioxide. We breathe out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What we breathe out, they breathe in.
Right, exactly right. Boy, this kid's sharp.
He's still in school. Yeah, look at his parents.
We breathe in the air, and we use the oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. All right? All right. The plants breathe in the air, and they use the carbon dioxide. They take the carbon out in order they use the carbon to grow limbs, to grow leaves, to grow roots. Basically, life on Earth is a carbon-based scenario, okay? So I breathe in the air, I use the oxygen, and I breathe out.
Exhale.
I'm thinking too far ahead, too far ahead of my tongue. So I exhale carbon dioxide. The plants inhale the atmosphere. They take the carbon out of the carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. How long would it be if the plants didn't have animal life, and if the animals didn't have plant life? How long would it be? What would the imbalance be? What would the length? How long would it take for the imbalance to wipe out life on planet Earth?
Wouldn't take very long.
Probably less than a year. The atmosphere would become oxygen rich, and there wouldn't be enough carbon dioxide for the plants to survive. If we didn't have the plants, the atmosphere would become carbon dioxide rich. There wouldn't be enough oxygen to sustain plant life. So we're going to talk about this later when we get to that sheet I gave you. But they want me to believe that there are billions of years between plant life and animal life, when by their own data, the imbalance would be so great after somewhere between a year and 2 years, nothing could survive on the face of the earth. Is this starting to get your attention? I mean, guys, the whole thing doesn't make a bit of sense scientifically, logically, or anything else, does it? Now, when you get to college, and let me give you some advice, because I got into this scenario and it's not pleasant. If you start asking embarrassing questions from the professor, you're probably not going to have a good day, because most of them have a God complex and they do not want to be challenged, especially with scenarios that obviously make sense and from the standpoint of creation, but don't make sense from the standpoint of science. Just read the book, listen to the lecture, tell him what he wants to hear, and in my case I said, however, I put down, and big red pen, he'd say, you gave me the right answer, but you're wrong. You know, he put stuff all over the paper. And it aggravated the tar out of it. I mean, it did. One class I had to drop because I was in pre-med, I had straight A's, and he had decided to give me an F. And it did not matter what I did, he gave me an F. So before the last drop ad came along, I went and dropped the course and took it the next semester with a different professor. And I learned my lesson. I put down what he wanted to hear, but I still made comments. Alrighty. 24 through 26.
God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things and beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.
Okay, now somebody finish to the end of the chapter.
So God created man in his own image. The image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I will give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has a breath of life in it. I give every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Okay. So on the last day, the sixth day, he created the land-based animals. And then at the end of that day, he created mankind. And what was the purpose of mankind?
To tend the earth. To take care of the earth.
To take care of the earth, to watch over the earth. But the biggest hypocrisy is in evolution. You don't know, so I'm going to tell you. Have you ever noticed how they want to push the envelope and they want to say, the animals develop to a certain point and then they evolve. They'll have at some point an animal will be the ape will give, the chimpanzee will give birth to the ape, but it'll be a higher form of life. It'll be smarter, it'll be more efficient, it'll be more capable to survive. Okay. And then the old one will die out because the new one will become dominant. You realize, don't you, that at that point you not only have to create a male but a female, and they say it just happens as a single response, but it doesn't happen as a single response if you only have a male that develops or a female that develops. Because how are you going to propagate a race of those things? And so then on the other hand, they come along and they say, let's save the condor. You know, if I was an evolutionist and the condors were going extinct, wouldn't I be racing down Main Street with a flag saying, it's true, look at the condor. It's inefficient, it's too big, there's not enough food for it. A better species was created, it's called the vulture. And the condor's dying out and the vulture's doing great. It's true. No, they march down Main Street and say, let's save the condor. On the one hand, they're saying, this is how it's supposed to happen. And on the other hand, they're saying, let's save the condor. What did this just say? It said that we're supposed to tend the animal. We're supposed to take care of them. They want to yell, evolution, 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 but when the evidence shows up, they want to be Christians. Think about that for a minute. I want to push evolution on you, but when the condor starts to struggle, or when the whale starts to struggle, or when the polar bear starts to struggle, I start I start filling the television with advertisements to go and help it. Well, what would that be? That would be a Christian. That would be a human being that God created because God said to do that. So you look at him and say, hey, you believe in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, don't you? Huh? Well, let me read this to you. And then we have this little discussion, and they run away mad. But isn't it true? Isn't it true? They want to be evolutionists as long as it fits their scenario, but then they want to be creationists when they want to save the polar bear. The whole thing's a big hypocrisy. You know, they're right. We're supposed to be helping the polar bear. And it's kind of interesting that they don't seize the moment when they have evidence that it might be true. And if we don't get upstairs, we're not going to be able to meet down here anymore.